Today's episode will cover the popular martial arts manga and anime Baki the Grappler, written and illustrated by Keisuke Itagaki, which has been actively published since 1991 in Weekly Shonen Champion. Today's anime will specifically focus on Baki the Grappler, the 2001 anime adaptation, which adapted the manga's first run of 1991 to 1999, animated by Group TAC Studio. This will be an interesting episode because Baki the Grappler is the kind of series that you will quickly know if it's for you within about the first episode or the first couple of chapters. Either you buy into its crazy world or it's just too stupid to bother with. This TV series was, of course, licensed by Funimation once upon a time in the mid-2000s, and they did a lot of heavy promotion across a bunch of channels, like they were on UFC, MMA, boxing, but it didn't nearly quite make back its money for all of that promotion, and so it only had the one run and has been out of print for almost 2 decades at this point. And while the same is true for pretty much all of Baki's manga, there is one official English release for the manga called New Grappler Baki, and it's an ebook format, so 31 volumes at $5 a pop, and it is specifically the manga run from 2000 to 2005, so not even this series. And if you want the anime adaptation for that, that is where the 2018 Netflix series picks up the story. So that's basically why New Grappler Baki is a thing in the first place. And as of this recording, we don't have any official English releases of anything else. It's all scanlations. Hey guys, yeah, it's another record scratch moment. I don't think I'm developing a superpower here, but it is very strange. So today, you're hearing this insert. Today is May 15th, and I just got this notice on the Anime News Network where this company called Kodama Tales, they are going to publish Baki the Grappler. Again, the first run of Baki. They are publishing Baki the Grappler worldwide in English, and it will be in physical and digital formats, and they will start releasing them in October this year, 2025. And yeah, they are just doing it now. It's the original 48 volume run is being condensed into 24 volumes, so I don't know how much that's going to go for, but hey, this is now finally a new legally available version in English coming soon, or relatively soon, in the fall. And yes, I really wish them all the success in the world. They will be printing the English version in Japan, so who knows where we're going to be in October of 2025, but it's still pretty cool that, yeah, we now have official confirmation that Baki the Grappler in English manga is coming. So enjoy the rest of the episode. But we will get to that at a later date. I really wanted to focus on what is classic Baki. This is the origin story of Baki. This is where a lot of Keisuke Itagaki's early ideas for Baki were developed. It sets all the groundwork for everything that gets built upon in the 2018 Netflix series and beyond. Well, as you just heard, Baki Hanma has to fight his dad, Yujiro Hanma, who is the strongest creature on planet Earth. Why? The kid was literally born to do this. Plus, Yujiro peppers in various, shall we say, motivations through the series to make Baki want to fight him. So this anime follows Baki's origin story as he encounters several fighters across a wide range of disciplines, and also lack thereof, from karate matches to Yakuza street brawls to fighting Bigfoot. No, I did not stutter. He's also airdropped into a national park to fight Special Forces commandos, also throwing himself off a cliff to unlock the secret technique of near-death reaction time, I guess. It was, yeah, just throws himself off a cliff, sure. These are but a few of the things Baki puts himself through, all to be worthy of facing his father, Yujiro Hanma, the Ogre. And Baki isn't the only one gunning for the title. Various fighters across this story take their shot at the Ogre. And basically, to set the tone for this episode, if you are still wondering what kind of series this is, it's not a stretch at all to think of overall story of Baki the Grappler as this one giant tournament arc with Yujiro Hanma at the top of the mountain. He's the ultimate heel character, or maybe more like a ruthless ruler. Yujiro Hanma stands at the pinnacle of Baki's world. Something else that might be a detractor for getting into not just the season, but just the story in general. Again, Baki the Grappler is a manliness to its core, and as such, women basically don't exist in this story. Again, in Season 1, Baki's main relationship is with his mother, and it is a terribly toxic relationship. She is terrible to that child, because again, she literally had Baki, she repeatedly tells him, I'm raising you so you could fight your father to the death, so then your father will love me. It's a terrible relationship. It is presented as such, and the conclusion to this arc is suitably heartbreaking all around, particularly, again, for young Baki. In a more positive relationship, Baki does get a girlfriend. Her name is Kozue, and that relationship is, again, a lot more wholesome, but that's not really addressed until the Netflix series, and then after they have their moment, Kozue has basically vanished from the story for the most part. So if you're looking for a series with dynamic and interesting female characters, I'm very sorry to say Baki the Grappler ain't it, Chief. There are 2 chief arcs to this anime, and they are rightly split into 2 separate seasons. Season 1 is Baki's true origin stories, his humble beginnings as a hothead kid street brawler punk to as he matures as a fighter. And then season 2 covers what's called the Maximum Tournament arc, which is your classic secret underground arena in a no-holds-barred, anything-goes punch-out fest that introduces a ton of new characters into the cast. And as far as the manga is concerned, this is the pinnacle of classic Baki. This is where the series truly started to gain its identity and the kind of mood and tone it would set going forward after this tournament arc. So let's jump into this by starting with the man behind all of this madness, Keisuke Itagaki, who had a rather colorful career before ever entering the manga space. Keisuke Itagaki started practicing Shorinji Kempo as a teenager and had a long fascination with martial artists and everything to do with the fighting world ever since he was a kid. And Itagaki joined the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force at the age of 20 and served 5 years as a member of the prestigious 1st Airborne Corps. During his service, he also practiced amateur boxing and competed at the National Sports Festival. However, he was hospitalized after a severe training accident and was later discharged from the service. So suddenly cast adrift and seeking a new direction for his life, Keisuke Itagaki fell back on another hobby he'd kept up since childhood, which is painting and illustration. This eventually brought him to the doors of the master manga artist Kazuo Koike and his Gekiga Village School in 1987. Now, Kazuo Koike, if you don't know, this is one of the old masters of manga. We're talking Lone Wolf and Cub, Lady Snowblood, Crying Freeman, just a taste of some of the best manga ever written, some of the best mature manga ever written. It is very, very mature, and it's very obvious where Itagaki gets a lot of his stylistic influences having such a teacher. And as a brief overview look, a very top-down approach, Gekiga was this counterculture movement against the perception of, manga is just disposable kid stuff. Osamu Tezuka was certainly popularized a lot of manga. He's called the god of manga for a reason, and a lot of people were emulating his style. But because of that, it sort of created this perception that, this style is all manga is. This is only what people care about. Even Tezuka would try to, even with his style, he would tackle more mature themes in his work. But it was really the Gekiga movement that really tried to do insert adult themes and adult imagery, and just it featured a lot more of like the gritty stories. So it's a little bit of like noir in that way. A lot of adult men down on their luck or manipulated by bad actors, usually seductive women, basically became now what we would call the seinen genre. So shonen means young man. Seinen is adult man. It's like your 18 plus audience. And so Kazuo Koike was obviously part of this Gekiga movement with some of the other things he had offered, and The Wounded Man being some of the big ones. And Itagaki clearly took a lot of inspiration from Koike's manga and his style, even adopting the main character from Wounded Man as his pen name. So Itagaki's real name is Hiroyuki Itagaki. He took Keisuke as, the main character from Kazuo Koike's manga, The Wounded Man of all things. And so Itagaki's debut manga came roughly 2 years later with Make Upper. This ran from August 1989 to September 1991 in Young Shoot and Comic Shoot magazines. And Make Upper follows a man who is the ultimate beautician. He can make anyone look beautiful, and with almost minimal effort or supplies, beautifying them in an over-the-top fashion. And it is an early look at Itagaki's art style, and also it's a strange manga. I really don't know what else to say about Make Upper. It is a thing all of its own. But after Make Upper came Baki the Grappler. This was published in Akita Publishing Company's Weekly Shonen Champion, Written and illustrated by Keisuke Itagaki. The manga began in 1991 and is still being published to this day in Weekly Shonen Champion. And Itagaki has almost exclusively worked on Baki the Grappler, the main series, plus he's produced a bevy of spin-off titles in the Baki universe. But it's not so straightforward as just saying he's done Baki the Grappler and it's been the same title. No, Baki the Grappler has undergone a couple of title changes, and so I'll kind of run through these as quick as I can real quick. Here is the general order of the Baki series. So our focus, if you would like to read the manga that goes along with the anime series, you, of course, have Baki the Grappler starting in 1991, and it ran from 1991 to 1999. 42 volumes total, so again, a weekly series, and there's a little bit of subdivision in here as well. So the first 8 volumes, or the first 72 chapters, are the original run. Itagaki just has this character, Baki. He's the underground champion of this fighting arena, and he has a couple of matches to defend his title. There's actually a OVA from 1994 by Knack Productions called Grappler Baki. And so the true beginning of this anime, Baki the Grappler 2001, see, it's already looping in on itself. So the remaining volumes, 9 through 42, or chapters 73 through 370, begins the reboot and the current run of the series, and subsequently this is what the Baki the Grappler anime covers. After Baki the Grappler, we had simply titled Baki in 2000, and this covers what's known as the Escaped Death Row Convicts arc, and also this is where the Netflix series, when Baki the Grappler got an adaptation in 2018, it was just called Baki 2018, this is where that show picks up. Also, this covers what's called the Raitai Tournament, which was Baki 2020. The third iteration is called Baki Hanma, Son of Ogre. The manga was in 2006, and the Netflix series is Hanma Baki, Son of Ogre. I think it's like 2022, 21 or something like that. Manga number 4 is Baki Do, started its run in 2014, and this is called the Father versus Son arc, is what this starts with. On Netflix, this is Hanma Baki, Son of Ogre, Season 2, that came out in 2023. And then there's still a little bit more of Baki Do left to adapt, where they have a revived Masashi Miyamoto taking on the Baki crew. He's a famous samurai swordsman. So in 2018, the manga 2018, we have Baki Do, but Do is spelled in a different kanji. It's not confusing at all. And then Baki Rahen began its run in 2023, and this one's interesting. It's focusing almost exclusively on the side characters and the extended universe of Baki and his bros, which through all of this, since 1991 all the way up till now, Itagaki's been working on the main series of Baki, and he's also produced various one-shots and mini-series concerning Baki and the crew over the years, including, I'll just mention, a sequel spin-off for the Death Row Convicts arc. You know, we beat the Death Row Convicts, but they're not dead. They're actually coming back, and they're badder than ever, but it's relegated to a spin-off manga of all things. A Stranger Edition is a isekai, or a Trapped in a New World. This is a parody manga featuring one of the few characters to actually die in the main Baki series, which, considering how much punishment these men endure in this series, it is an extremely violent, just hard-hitting manga. So considering how much punishment these men take, the fact that one of these guys actually took enough punishment to die is impressive in and of itself. And from what I've heard, this parody manga is equal parts ridiculous and also just ridiculous action. In between all of this, again, Keisuke Itagaki is a machine. He'll take on additional side projects, such as the 1996 manga Garoden, Way of the Lone Wolf. He was the illustrator, not the writer. These are based on the novels by Bako Yomemakura. Again, it's another martial arts series, and it actually got a recent anime of sorts. It was a short series on Netflix in 2024, although it looks nothing like Itagaki's art. It's about 6 episodes. Another fun little thing he worked on, Itagaki illustrated the Japanese movie poster for Rambo Last Blood. I gotta say, the way he draws Sylvester Stallone, the resemblance is uncanny. Keisuke Itagaki is also the father of manga artist Paru Itagaki, and she has a couple of popular series under her belt, most notably, I guess, Beastars, which had a nice long anime run on Netflix. You also have Rooster Fighter, and an upcoming series, Sanda, which is, I believe, being animated by Science Saru. Yeah. So Sanda is another action series about a kid who can transform into Santa Claus and then punish all the bad adults in a dystopian society. Power Itagaki is also published in Weekly Shonen Champion. And when it came out that, yes, she is the daughter of Keisuke Itagaki, they got a little more public. They take some very cute father-daughter photos together. So let's finally get to talking about Baki the Grappler 2001. Starting, of course, with the studio, Group TAC. Now, this studio was based in Shibuya, Tokyo. It was founded in 1968 by former members of Mushi Productions. So that was Osamu Tezuka's old studio before it closed down. And so we have Atsumi Tashiro, who's the representative director of Group TAC until his death in July 2010, shortly after which the company declared bankruptcy and then Group TAC was liquidated. The next director is Gisaburo Sugi, who is a director and screenwriter, and Sugi-san is still around. He's on the faculty at Kyoto Seika University, also contributing to various anime projects, chiefly on advisory roles and the occasional episode storyboard. Lastly, we have Susumu Aketagawa. He is a music producer and sound director, also a professor of anime at Kyoto Seika University. And so to talk a little bit about Group TAC, some of their projects and assistant works across the time that the studio was open, the studio's first film was 1974's Jack and the Beanstalk, followed by the 1976 TV anime Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Both of those came over to the USA with an English dub in 1980. Oh wait, no, I think it was just Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. That was 1980 dub. Although I wouldn't be surprised if Jack and the Beanstalk also came. I only have notes for that one. Whoops. They worked on multiple baseball anime series. They also worked on some TV specials in the 1980s. So this was Two Down, Full Base. That was a children's book adaptation. You had Touch and Nine. So these are manga by Mitsuru Adachi. Group TAC also adapted Adachi's shoujo comedy series, Hitari Ryoko, or Good Sunshine. They also provided a lot of sound work for the first season of Lupin III. They worked on the Yamato movie, The New Voyage. Some further animation credits. They worked on Those Who Hunt Elves, Street Fighter II the movie, and Vampire Princess Miyu. They were also involved in the production of Night on the Galactic Railroad. Also the soccer anime Captain Tsubasa, that's the 2001 with Madhouse. They worked on Grenadier and Black Blood Brothers. They also assisted with Tokyo Mew Mew, Technolize, and Hajime no Ippo, the movie Kimura vs. Mashiba. Also the first series of Bakugan, Battle Brawlers, and as well as assisting with Nadia, The Secret of Blue Water, as well as the Nadia movie. So again, Group TAC, this is a general overview of pretty much everything that they worked on, or a good chunk of what they worked on, until their bankruptcy and liquidation in 2010. The studio was largely absorbed by another studio called Diomedia, which originally had split from Group TAC in 2005, and it was named at the time Studio Barcelona. That studio went defunct, rebranded in 2007 as Diomedia, and then in 2010, it absorbed basically its parent. The final animation project by Group TAC was called Hanakappa, and this was picked up and completed by studios OLM and Zebek. And so with Group TAC, Baki the Grappler is an interesting case because the actual company fronting the money who gave Group TAC the contract for animating Baki is not what you would typically expect, because the chief producer of Baki the Grappler, or the company that fronted most of the money, is a company called Free Will. And this is a music record label company. And this is a record label company under the ownership of Dynamite Tommy, or Hiroshi Tomioka. He is a musician, a music producer, and the godfather of Visual Kei from the 1980s. So Visual Kei was like a glam rock, hair metal band sort of presentation. So under Free Will is a label that is called the Firewall Division. So when you talk about the actual producer or the chief production of Baki the Grappler, it is Free Will, but it's the Firewall Vision. So this is under Sony Music, who also manages Duran Gray, and an artist who will come up later in this episode because they worked on the opening credits theme. So when you go to the Firewall Division's official website, you will see Baki the Grappler as an anime title sitting amongst a sea of albums and other artists. And Baki the Grappler is the only anime that the Firewall Division company has directly produced, and you can still see it on their website. It's just an interesting case that I was not initially expecting, but that's the joy of sitting down and looking into this stuff. You never know really what you're going to find. And so we're going to get into the series directors. And yes, there are 2 directors. They split the season. Again, they split the show into 2 seasons, and they said we're going to have a director for season 1, and we're going to have a series director for season 2. So the season 1 director is Hitoshi Namba. They started as an in-betweener on Lupin III, also Techijin 28, or he came over here in the US as The New Adventures of Gigantor. Then he did some key animation on Space Adventure Cobra. He had his directorial debut in 1989 on the miniature 4-wheel drive anime Dash Yonkuro. And some further director credits include Hero Man, Gosick, more recently Golden Kamui. Tomo-chan is a Girl. That's a really cute series. I really do recommend you look that one up. Season 2's director is Katsuyoshi Yatabe. He is a director, storyboard artist, and screenwriter. He started his career at the subcontracting studio Ad Cosmo, but then quickly moved over to Sunrise for a more sustainable employment environment. He was involved in episode direction and storyboards on Armored Trooper Votoms. As a director, he was involved with 1987's The Dirty Pair OVA series, and the first 3 Brave series, so the super robot mecha shows Braves. So he was working on those from 1990 through 1993. And after Baki, basically everything, the majority of his projects in the 2000s after Baki the Grappler are very much 18 plus. Chiefly a little OVA called Boku no Pico. If you know, you know. But I was trying to find like something to show or talk about. But no, everything, all the titles are blurred or all the images are blurred. So yeah, it's just all hentai after Baki the Grappler. So yeah. Getting into character designs, they also split character designers between Season 1 and Season 2. So Season 1's character designer is Futoshi Higashide. Also, they were the chief animation director, as you would expect. Their early credits, they did some key animations on episodes of Mobile Suit Gundam Double Zeta. They were also a key animator on Giant Robo, The Day the Earth Stood Still, those OVAs. Again, just beautiful work. He's enjoyed more recent attention for animating several of the action scenes in Dragon Ball Super, and particularly Dragon Ball Super vs. Broly. Some additional character design and monster design credits. He worked on the first 26 episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, and he also had his directorial debut in the 2008 Batman Gotham Knight OVA series that was on episode 2, Crossfire. So the character designer on season 2 is Naoyuki Ito, and they were also involved in season 1 on storyboards. So their director credits include the first adaptation of the visual novel Kenon, and this is the 2002 anime adaptation by Toei. They also worked on Digimon Data Squad and part 2 of the Re-Cutie Honey 3-part OVA. And as part of Madhouse Studios, you got the Detective Noir, the Cyberpunk series No Guns Life, basically worked on all seasons and the movies of the Overlord franchise. So if you like Overlord and you like Isekai, this is your dude. For the writing credits, we have series composition Atsuhiro Tomioka. They worked on both seasons as the chief screenwriter. They also have done a lot of screenplay and series composition for the Pokemon franchise, as well as Digimon Adventure. They did soccer anime in Inazuma 11, also was on writing for the first 26 episodes of Yu-Gi-Oh! 5Ds, and episode scripts across Fairy Tail. So a lot of experience in writing shonen series, but particularly also a lot of kids shows. So I'm just thinking about all of the stuff that goes down in Baki the Grappler, and then thinking, yeah, this guy also wrote for Pokemon and Digimon and Yu-Gi-Oh! So, and one more credit before I get into the more review portion of this, we have art direction by Seiko Akashi, and she has background experience on a couple of fighting series. So we have Fatal Fury, Virtua Fighter, and Street Fighter 2, so the 1995 TV series, and then the Fatal Fury movies and Virtua Fighter movies. She also was art director on art direction on Doraemon movies, the 1998 and the 2002 movies. She also has art direction credits on the Viewtiful Joe anime series, adapting that GameCube game. Viewtiful Joe was also animated by Group TAC. She also worked on season 1 of iShield 21, the American football anime. And most recent as of this episode, she's been involved with MF Ghost Seasons 1 and 2. So to talk in general basically about the overall experience of watching Baki and with what these people were working on, I want to circle back to my earliest point about Baki's story being essentially one big tournament arc. Baki the Grappler, think about it as this massive what-if scenario. What if all the professional wrestlers were actually holding back their true strength and techniques? What if the professional wrestlers who have the superpower persona were like that was them for real? What if all of the superpower kung fu from all of the Jackie Chan and Bruce Lee films, what if all of that was real? Or what if all of those crazy techniques were not only real, but under-exaggerated? Baki the Grappler basically says yes and, with complete seriousness, and even goes further with a narrator to logically explain in detail how all of these ridiculous techniques are not only possible, but practical. And it's in these techniques where you can clearly see Itagaki's influences. We begin with a karate tournament, as well as one of the major characters, or major side characters, is a master karateka. You also have, the series quickly moves into wrestling, and steadily incorporates more MMA elements. Sometimes Itagaki just wants to draw a good old-fashioned knuckle duster, and he follows each scene in glorious, gory detail. And again, as Itagaki is a massive fan of everything martial arts, in all of the manga volumes, he'll include with the author's notes, he'll say, hey, I met this boxer, or I met this MMA fighter, and he'll have pictures of him posing with a wrestler or a sumo guy, just all various fighters across a spectrum of disciplines. He also is really into bodybuilding, so a lot of his manuals and a lot of his art style starts to lean more into that aspect. And this blends and creates something of what I would just say is one of the more distinct art styles in manga that I've ever seen. Baki the Grappler is first and foremost a hyper-masculine series. Like, every major character is built like the most insane, muscly bodybuilder you've ever seen, but also with these weird doll-like faces for some reason. Like, everyone's got a baby face in this manga, and then they're standing on top of these just absolutely grotesque, muscular, just abominations. And grotesque, I think, is an accurate word. I've never seen a neutral reaction to Itagaki's art style. Like, these guys, their muscles have muscles. But again, it's something that is distinctly Itagaki. No one ever really draws like him. As much of an in-your-face kind of style as he has, it is a bit toned down for the anime series. Also, early on, Itagaki's not quite at his, I should say, like, full power. The more ridiculous panels are in things that happen after what this anime covers. But if you jump into Baki with this show or in this manga, yeah, it's going to be a heck of an adjustment to possibly get used to the style. That being said, because this is a series about fighting, Baki the Grappler is one of the best paced series I've ever had the pleasure of reading. This is a fighting series to its core. Every fight is a narrative stepping stone for the next fight. Every story development outside of a fight is in service of setting up the next fight. In addition to his practical martial arts experience, Keisuke Itagaki, it is clear this man has studied human anatomy. It is clear that Itagaki is very intent with all of his pose work. In fact, I would put his character presentation and the way that he sets up a scene and all of his pose work, I would put Keisuke Itagaki's work up there next to Hirohiko Araki of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Yeah, I'm going there. Now, I don't think he's going to get a art gallery presentation like Araki does, but the similarities, I think if you look at the DNA of Baki the Grappler and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and then look at something like Fist of the North Star or Kinnikuman, which both of these stories are, of course, heavily influenced by, particularly Fist of the North Star, you may be able to see where I'm coming from, but Itagaki takes it a step further than Araki in terms of the musculature. Because of this, there is indeed a beauty to the way Itagaki portrays movement upon the page. Entire chapters will just melt away over the course of a single battle, and just the way he's able to present these fights in motion despite it being, again, it's on a printed page. This is where Itagaki proves himself as a master of paneling. Everything is setting up to effortlessly flow into the next move. And then you'll have a page turn. You'll have a major technique, a counter move, another page turn for a big reversal. There's a consistent back and forth in a Baki fight. Again, we're looking at 370 chapters or so of this entire thing. How can an anime adapt that much material? Well, it's because a lot of volumes and a lot of chapters are devoted to just the fights. So again, on paper, you see something like 48 episodes to adapt 370 chapters of manga. That is supposed to be an insane pace. But I would almost argue that you could finish the manga. Actually, you can easily finish the manga before you watch those 48 episodes. In under half the time, you could finish this manga before probably episode 12 if you really wanted to. The fights are just that well paced. It's just a crazy page turner. Now, of course, in practice, the anime has many more tools to enhance and draw out the atmosphere of the fight. You have music, your sound effects. You can expand more on the backgrounds, whereas the manga has a more zoomed in, or just the manga is all about the movement of the body. It's not too much concerned with the surrounding environment. So you're not going to get this cityscape or a detailed forest scene or whatever kind of arena that they're fighting in. Sometimes Itagaki will just have black because he wants to emphasize the impact, the physicality of a move. Whereas in the anime, it's more about enhancing the sense of space. Each of them have their respective strengths as a medium. And so again, the manga, it makes more fast pacing because that's how fast these guys are moving. But again, the anime has more things for internal dialogue and to build out a scene more than what the manga typically has time to do. There is a lot of room basically to expand on what happens in between Itagaki's panel, and I think the anime for the most part accomplishes this well. The character designs in the anime are also, while they adhere to Itagaki's for the most part, there is some consolidation of line work here and there. The physicality I also feel is toned down from the manga, again, to make them more TV appealing, to make these characters look more normal, I guess. And in addition, working on the movie magic, we have I mentioned some sound effects. So we have the sound director on both seasons, Hideo Takahashi. His work on Ipatsu Kiki Musume, this is a short OVA that stands out to me. This is a ridiculous short series. It's about a girl who gets herself into hilariously over-the-top accidents. And then you also have a narrator giving us a play-by-play on the sound effects. We have Kazutoshi Sato, also on both seasons. He had some standout effects work on 1986's Project Echo. He also worked on The Ghost in the Shell, 1995 movie. He worked on Hayao Miyazaki films as well. That includes Nausicaa, My Neighbor Totoro, Castle in the Sky, Kiki's Delivery Service, and Porco Rosso. I also want to highlight some additional animation directors. So we have animation directors including Masayuki Sato, who he did the in-betweens on the 1994 Baki OVA, actually. And his credits also include key animation on both Neon Genesis Evangelion movies. So that's the Death, True, and then the end of Evangelion. He's also done character design work for TV series Air Gear, also the Magical Girl series Precure, as well as his work on various One Piece films in the 2010s, and also the more recent one. This includes Gold, One Piece film Stampede, and the film Red. We also have Shigeki Awai, who is a key animator on Urusei Yatsura, Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam, Golden Boy. He's also a prolific hentai director. I mean, it's literally all 18 plus past 1997. So, Minefumi Harada, he worked on the Sayuki Gaiden OVA series. Devil is a Part-Timer Season 2. He also worked on the Winter 2025's anime series Twilight Hotel. That's episodes 1 through 6. Hirokazu Hisayuki, he was a longtime animator on the Brave series, again, the Super Robot anime, plus episodes of Outlaw Star. He's also done some original character designs for Queen's Blade. And then last but not least, we have Atsuko Sasaki, who was a key animator on some Studio Bones series, Wolf's Reign and Eden of the East. And so in fight choreography or I should say like fight locations, Season 1 has a wider variety of locations. Baki has fights basically all across Tokyo. He starts off in the streets and alleyways. He has a fight in a fine dining restaurant. He takes a few trips into the mountains to train, where he fights Bigfoot. And he also gets airdropped out of a helicopter into the middle of the woods to fight a man named Gaia, who's basically John Rambo if he could use ninjutsu. And season 1, overall, if you're looking for more like environmental artwork and the pretty backgrounds, I'd say like the mountain scenes in the forest are pretty well done for what it is. It's got a nice sense of space. And the fights in season 1 is more of Baki having to be more scrappy and using the environment to his benefit. So, like shards of glass after he breaks a window in the fine dining restaurant, or having to hide underwater in a nearby pond, when in the forest side for an ambush, that kind of thing. Season 2, however, is where I sadly have to say, like, season 2 didn't get as much love. It had less production time and resources than the first season, so there is a noticeable dip in quality for, again, this is your premier fighting tournament arc of the series. While season 2 does have a brief intermission of Baki traveling the world, I believe he goes to South America to train for a while, and there's a little bit of a time skip, and then we get to the maximum tournament arc. Again, since most of the season takes place in this underground arena, there's not really much, there's basically no backgrounds. It all just blends into the back. You have dirt floor, wooden walls, and then vague crowd shots of painted in people, and then you have the harsh lights above. And that's basically the whole season. And as an interesting note, I find the underground arena, it is situated under Karakuen Hall, which is a relocation in Tokyo. And this secret underground arena is only open to a select individuals who can keep its existence a secret. The real, true, hardcore fight fans. We're talking, this is an arena that holds thousands of people, and it's in a secret. You have to take an elevator to get down into it. So there's a bit of a hand waviness to that aspect of the story, but I just kind of find it funny. The musical credits all pretty much go to what was called Project Baki. It was just a music group that was put together for the anime. I searched around a couple of ways and don't really see where they publish the members. If you can find them, more power to you. Lyrics and music for the opening and ending credits are credited to a woman named Ryoko Aoyagi. And so these songs, the opening credits, I Believe, and opening to All Alone, the ending credits, Reborn, and ending to Loved, all of these are basically her only anime credits as far as anime music. And I was looking at, okay, maybe she did general music. No, this is basically what I could find for her. And sadly, she was diagnosed with ovarian cancer in 2008 and then passed away in 2009 at the age of 30. And for what it's worth, I mean, these are some solid little bops. I would have to say, for a series like Baki the Grappler, having something that's a little bit J-pop doesn't really tonally match. But again, it's not a knock against her performance. I think it's just maybe the wrong style of music for Baki the Grappler. But nevertheless, they get the job done. And at the very least, it's a little bit of a reprieve after all the hypermasculinity and hyperviolence in Baki. Now, there is one thing of note, because for the Funimation release of Baki the Grappler, which I'll talk about Funimation in a second, they replaced all of these songs by Ryoko Aoyagi with Duran Gray's song Child Prey. So all of the openings just across the whole thing, and what you heard at the start when we were transitioning into this portion, that's from Child Prey. And so Duran Gray is a metal band formed in 1997. Again, they're signed to the Firewall division under the Free Will label. They started out as a Visual Kei band, and during their time, they've just undergone a bunch of changes to their style. Ostensibly, their music still falls under metal. They've gone through heavy, alternative, progressive metal. It's a band with a long career of pivots. And anime-wise, Baki the Grappler is basically what they are best known for. So speaking of Funimation, the English dub was, of course, done by Funimation. The ADR production was done. And in particular, Season 1 ADR was a longtime Funimation employee, Mike McFarlane. So you'll know him from Dragon Ball Z in the first 2 seasons of the Funimation redubs. He also voiced Master Roshi. He worked on Full Metal Alchemist as well as Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, also voicing Gene Havoc. He did Attack on Titan, voicing John Kirstein as well. He also worked on Lupin III. Again, is a voice of Ishikawa Goemon in addition. And then Chad Bowers of Funimation directed the last 4 episodes of Season 1. He also did ADR for Case Close and the Dragon Ball Z Movie 2, The World's Strongest. They were joined by Chris Kaysen on episodes 19 and 20, who then took over as ADR director for the show's second half. Chris Kaysen is known for Dragon Ball Z and GT, again, the first 2 seasons of the Funimation redubs. He was also in charge of the Netflix dub of Vinland Saga, Mob Psycho 100 seasons 1 and 2, plus the extra episodes. They didn't bring him back for season 3. And he also voices Gluttony in Full Metal Alchemist and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. He is joined by Eric Vale and Sean Michael T, also on scripts. So they've been involved in Dragon Ball TV and the films. Case Closed, Shuffle, Eric Vale is Trunks. As far as this anime, this was around the time that he started using the name Eric Vale. And then I believe it's episode 19, he voices the wrestler Naito. And so Baki Hanma is, of course, our protagonist and the fighting prodigy of the series. Baki's main strength is more in his intelligence and adaptive fighting style, also coupled with his work ethic and excellent reaction time that is further developed through the series. Again, with Keisuke Itagaki, he's being a fan of martial artists. Basically, everyone in Baki is a direct or indirect homage to one or more fighters. And so Baki Hanma is widely reported to be based on the real-life mixed martial arts fighter Naoki Taira, who is nicknamed the Grappler, so named for his fighting style of chokeholds and ankle locks, which is something that Baki is also known for. So Taira was active from 1987 to 1995, and he had some further exhibition matches around 2001, so he would have been active at the perfect time when Itagaki was planning this manga. So in Japanese, Baki Hanma is voiced by Masami Kikuchi, and he is a well-known industry veteran, probably still best known for his role as Tenchi Masaki from Tenchi Muyo, also Keiichi Morisato from Ah My Goddess, Joe Kido from Digimon Adventure, plus several monsters across that franchise. In English, Baki is voiced by Robert McCullum, a Funimation regular, Reiner Braun from Attack on Titan. You've got Goten from Dragon Ball, Don Flamingo from One Piece, and Shinya Kogami from Psycho Pass for a couple of examples. But I would be remiss to say that Baki Hanma was picked up by Troy Baker, beginning with the 2018 Netflix anime. But in this anime, Troy Baker was in Baki the Grappler 2001. He is voicing various background characters. There's a kid named Kato, who is one of the karate disciples of a character we'll talk about in a minute, Master Doppo Orochi. And so Kato's one of those brash disciples that is one of the early opponents of Baki. Next up, let's talk about Baki's dad, Yujiro Hanma, the strongest, bestest, most powerfulest creature on the planet. Yujiro represents the martial peak of the Baki series. He is the king of the castle. He is the appropriate antagonist for a show all about the pursuit of strength. He is strength incarnate. No characters can match him, and only a few characters can even stand up to him for a little bit. And it's like everything that it takes everything that they can to even endure a blow from like a finger flick from Yujiro Hanma. He is, for all of his strength, Yujiro Hanma is very petty, while also claiming to not care about the results of any fighting tournament because obviously he's the strongest. So it's a man who is strength incarnate, yet is very emotionally immature and kind of a fragile pride. But again, if anyone mentions it to him, Yujiro will it's likely that Yujiro will just kill them. And so it's an interesting writing conundrum sometimes for how do you convince an unstoppable force to not participate in a fighting tournament where he will obviously wreck the entire shop. Well, there will be various ways that they try to delay him or placate him across this show and others. It's kind of an interesting balancing act to watch characters try and keep Yujiro Hanma under some kind of control, even though they know they have no control over the situation. In Japanese, Yujiro Hanma is voiced by Kenji Nomura. So if we're going to talk about, I mentioned Kinnikuman Ultimate Muscle earlier. He voices Buffalo Man, Haratobe Muscle, Scarface. Kinnikuman is basically the influence on every modern shonen fighter that no one talks about. It's a really good manga. I think more people should check it out. Yeah, I think it also has a series on Netflix, but it's also in a state of like similar to Baki, where there's been so much Kinnikuman that they just have to go, oh well, here's a catch-up episode, we guess. He also voices Tatsuya Ushiyama from Golden Kamui. His voice really lends himself to that threatening aura of I don't care attitude of Yujiro Hanma. And meeting him in English is Matt Tompkins. Surprisingly, the only other voice acting role I could find was Zimmerman from the first movie of Case Closed. That's the time-bombed skyscraper. Let's jump into the side cast now with an early antagonist in one of Baki's first major fights. This is a kid named Kaoru Hanayama, considered the strongest Yakuza in Japan. Despite being a teenager, Hanayama has the physique of a giant. This kid is just built different. Hanayama has no formal training, instead relying on his immense brute strength and particularly his grip strength, which is so powerful. If he gets his hands on you, he will just take your arm and twist it, and the pressure that builds up in your arm will cause it to explode from the pressure. And yeah, it is as gruesome as it sounds. Hanayama in the show initially picks a fight with Baki to get Yujiro's attention, but after that fight, he becomes a friend and ally to Baki. And Hanayama is supposedly based on the real-life Yakuza street brawling legend Kei Hanagata. So you can kind of Hanayama, Hanagata. This guy was a legendary bare-knuckle street brawler. He was able to take a ton of punishment and decorated with a bunch of scars from his duels. Hanagata's life and story has been adapted numerous times across film, manga, and video games. Kaoru Hanayama pays tribute to Hanagata as well, with innumerable scars that he got in a massive street brawl, as well as a massive back tattoo of this giant ogre that's all scarred up. In Japanese, Hanayama is voiced by Masayuki Nakata, who also acts as the Japanese narrator for Baki the Grappler. And his debut role was Odero Henrik in 1993's Mobile Suit Victory Gundam, or V Gundam, maybe not Victory Gundam, Mobile Suit V Gundam, plus the video game appearances for that character until his retirement in 2007. He's also done some dubbing over English cartoons. So we have Doctor Strange from Spider-Man the Animated Series, also Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. These cartoons came to the Japanese Cartoon Network in 2004 and 2005. He also voiced Parasite from Superman the Animated Series. He voiced Sloane from Batman the Animated Series and Mojo Jojo from Powerpuff Girls. The English narrator, just while I'm at it, is Bob Carter, and he also gave some grunts and roars as Bigfoot, or in this series is called the Yasha Ape. He's also voiced Bojack from the Dragon Ball Z movie, that was number 9, Bojack Unbound. And then we have Kyle Herbert, the voice of your Toonami childhood after Steve Blum. This is our narrator of Dragon Ball Z, as well as the voice of Son Gohan, Kibe Inazuka from Naruto, Kamina from Gurren Lagann, Yu Yu Hakusho, One Piece, Sozo Aizen from Bleach. Next up, we have our resident karate master. His name is Doppo Orochi, and he is based off of Mas Oyama, who is the founder of the hard-hitting style of Kyoku Kinshai. Oh boy. Kyoku Shinkai Karate. Whew. Which translates to Society of the Ultimate Truth. I really was hoping I could do that in one go, but man, that is... Oof. Doppo Orochi, in Baki's universe, is the founder of Shinkai Karate, which I believe translates to Society of the New Truth. So you have Mas Oyama's Society of the Ultimate Truth and Doppo Orochi, Societies of the New Truth. In addition to Mas Oyama, Doppo is also a reference to Hideo Nakamura, the founder of the hard-hitting, no-retreat, always attacking, overwhelm the opponent, the Karate-do Kendokai. Doppo was also an easy visual reference to Sagat from Street Fighter. They're both bald, they have an eye patch, they have the Kempo gear, they live for the fight, and also are both associated with tigers. One of his nicknames is Tiger Slayer, and Doppo's dojo has him basically karate chopping a tiger to death. So in Japanese, Doppo Orochi is voiced by Mugi Hito, who's done Kaseki from Dr. Stone, Vice Admiral Mifune from Irresponsible Captain Tyler, and then Principal Wahlberg from Mashal, Magic and Muscles. Also, Mugi Hito is one of the actors from this series who returns to be the Japanese voice for Old Man Tokugawa, the man who runs the underground arena. So he came back for the Netflix series. And then for English, Doppo Orochi is voiced by Greg Dulce, who is Iwao Yamamura from Barakamon. We have Kurt von Rudensort from Saga of Tanya the Evil, and then Kuraha from the shonen series Noragami. So if Doppo Orochi is the master of attack, we have his opposite in Goki Shibukawa, the master of Aikido and the master of defense. Goki Shibukawa is actually one of the oldest fighters of the series. He's well over pushing 80, but he's still perfectly capable of throwing around all of the physically stronger opponents while basically taking no damage. You have all these freaks of muscle, and then you have this tiny, frail, Yoda-looking old man. Shibukawa is based on the Aikido master Gozo Shioda, who founded the Yoshinkan style of Aikido after World War II. In Japanese, he's voiced by Hiroshi Naka, who's Otto Octavius in the PS4 Spider-Man game, so the Japanese dub of that. Coach Ike Ukai from Haikyuu, Monkey D. Garp from One Piece, as well as the vice principal from Nichijou My Ordinary Life, the slice of life anime where the vice principal suplexes the deer. That's Hiroshi Naka. In English, we have Bruce Elliott, who you might know as Captain Ginyu from the Dragon Ball Z, as well as the narrator for the series The Devil is a Part-Timer, as well as Space Dandy. He also voiced, Bruce Elliott also does an early supporting character. So Baki's mother, who is voiced by Wendy Powell, has a butler basically, and so Bruce Elliott voices the butler before Goki Shibukawa enters the scene. Shibukawa comes in, I believe, primarily in Maximum Tournament Saga. And then we have what I'm going to call the two antagonistic figures of Season 2. We have our Kung Fu master, Retsu Kaio, our character who represents the 4,000-year legacy of Kung Fu, Chinese Kung Fu. He's obviously referencing Bruce Lee. Retsu is also one of the strongest and most skillful fighters in the series, and a really fun character to watch, even though he's basically all bad in Season 2. So he is very antagonistic in the show, but after his fight with Baki, Retsu softens up a bit. You can say he makes a babyface turn, and it really broadens his worldview. I really love Kaio Retsu and his development in the Netflix series and beyond. But this is when he was introduced, and he is voiced by Kunihiko Yasui, who voices Iori Yagami from King of Fighters. And then in English, I say this guy is super antagonistic because Retsu Kaio in English is voiced by Ed Blaylock. Instantly recognizable, he's doing the King Bradley voice from Full Metal Alchemist. I think this is a good performance by Ed, but it really doesn't fit for Kaio Retsu. I really prefer Kaiji Tang's voice from the 28 series and beyond. Retsu Kaio is basically this unknown Chinese martial artist who is destroying dudes in this tournament. So Ed Blaylock really leans into the I'm going to take you apart aspect of it. And last and certainly not least, our other chief antagonist, it is Jack Hammer, or also Jack Hanma. And I'm not entirely positive about this, but from what I could find, Jack Hammer seems to be braised and cooked up. He seems to be based on the British wrestler Thomas Billington, so the Dynamite Kid. And this seems to track because, again, Thomas traveled the world and he was also included in the All Japan Pro Wrestling tournament where he had a rivalry with the famous Japanese wrestler Tiger Mask. This would have been a big deal. This guy would have been a big deal and likely someone that Itagaki would have been very well known for. And I was looking at pictures of Thomas Billington, and I can kind of see the resemblance to Jack Hanma. So there's enough there to where we've basically pieced it together okay, this could be it. So in Japanese, Jack Hammer is voiced by Koichi Sakaguchi, who is Sid from Final Fantasy X, also Prince Hata from Gintama, plus several other voices. I'll also throw out Tim Ray, specifically from Mobile Suit Gundam The Origin, so Amuro Ray's father. In English, we have Daniel Penz, who also voices Alexander Garland, or Zargan. That's the humongous Greco-Roman wrestler dude. Zargan is pancratic, I think is what's called, the style of wrestling. I don't have it written in my notes. I'm trying to do that off the top of my head. Pancratic, or he's that kind of wrestler, really big dude. Daniel Penz also, you'll know him as Shogo Jinai from Black Blood Brothers. And there are a ton of more incidental side characters or one-offs. So again, if you go through the English dub, you'll find certainly many more actors than what I listed here. And I just kept it to this list for the sake of time. And so every character, every side character in these guys is basically defined by both their fighting style. So their fighting style determines their fighting philosophy. And because in this series, fighting philosophy is literally your life philosophy, this is basically how everybody behaves. There's not going to be a lot of personal development or changes of opinion. It's more like in the case of Kaio Retsu or Kaoru Hanayama, who start off as very straightforward antagonistic characters. Okay, now they're friendly with Baki, but it's also they have found flaws in their own technique. So they expand their arsenal within their technique. So it's basically like personal development in this series is, okay, everyone starts at this level and they just become better martial artists through this series. There's not any real moment of self-reflection that's not to do with martial arts. Every fighter in Baki is looking to be the strongest at what it is that they do. I want to prove that, Yakuza brawling is the strongest style. I want to prove that Kung Fu is the most superior style. Karate's the best. No, screw you, this style is the best. So on and so forth. And what makes Baki himself very interesting is his grappler style of combat is he doesn't really adhere to any one style. Baki himself is an endlessly adaptive character. His early fights showcase this creativity because Baki Hanma, because he's so observant and he's very good at thinking on his feet, Baki is stealing his opponent's moves in the middle of the fight and recreating them and 5 different ways to improve the technique that you're currently hitting me with. Here we go. And then he does the move. As the series goes on, of course, Baki grows his arsenal. And so you can imagine that's the real joy of watching Baki's development, is him learning and taking from all these different styles and making something completely original to him, and what's basically called the grappler style. And the world of Baki, to add a little bit of extra flavor to all of this, one reason, so I really like the fights in Baki, as I've obviously said throughout the episode, but additionally, we get little peppers of these real life and real life adjacent cameos and tributes. Again, Itagaki is pulling from a wide array of martial arts, wrestling, MMA. This is an entire lovely, Baki the Grappler is a love letter to fighting. And so in addition to the people mentioned above and the references mentioned above, we have a character early on. Again, a lot of early Baki is just what if pro wrestlers were holding back their strength and now they can unleash their moves for real. So one of these wrestlers is a man named Mount Toba, and he is a reference to the real-life wrestler Giant Baba, who was the first non-white wrestler to win the NWA World Heavyweight title. There's another wrestler, more like a seasoned pro wrestler, who comes and goes out of retirement. The character's name is Kanji Igari, and he is based on Antonio Inoki, a 12-time professional wrestling world champion, and Itagaki actually penned a tribute chapter to Antonio Inoki after his passing in 2022. And the chapter is basically an elderly Kanji Igari is reflecting on his/Inoki's careers. It's honestly a very heartfelt chapter. Keisuke Itagaki, for all the trappings that I've said of how straightforward and not complicated the writing of Baki is, that's not to say the writing is without depth. Itagaki is indeed, I think, a really good writer. It's something that kind of goes underappreciated about his style, to the fact that he's been able to keep Baki the Grappler going at this level for more than 30 years. I mean, that's an achievement. That is truly an achievement. And for all the ridiculousness of the story, I just want to highlight that real quick in the middle of all this. And getting back to the real world references, we have boxing legend Mike Tyson represented here as the character Iron Michael. So you will see Iron Michael in the Maximum Tournament arc, and then he'll reappear at various points in the series. We also have, if we're talking boxing, we have Muhammad Ali and his son Ali Jr. I wonder who that could be. In fact, in the Netflix dub, because you're not going to see him here, you'll see him again in the Netflix series. I think it's like in the 2020, it's like the second season or whatever. But they just straight up say Muhammad Ali and Ali Jr. And I also want to touch on one of many points in the manga, but there's one in particular where there's a flashback of a young Yujiro Hanma when he meets Muhammad Ali. And it's a rare moment of Yujiro Hama being truly humble because he pulls Muhammad Ali to the side and has this long and very genuine praise for Muhammad Ali's activism during the 60s and for the protesting the Vietnam War. And this is one of those, like, sometimes Itagaki uses Yujiro Hanma to express what he's saying. So Yujiro Hanma was basically a voice box for Itagaki in that moment. Also, and most notably, Baki has featured multiple U.S. presidents taking turns being terrified by the ogre, who turns up to the White House. He can just walk into the White House, and he makes every U.S. president swear a non-aggression pact specifically towards Yujiro Hanma. You have Bill Clinton all the way up through Biden, and then most recently Donald Trump. So you had two of my favorite out-of-context panels, actually. There's one where Yujiro is making George Bush be his personal chauffeur. And so Yujiro is just sitting in the back seat telling George Bush how much he sucks at driving and also running a country. And then the first time Donald Trump's in the office, he's swearing the oath of allegiance and just absolutely wetting himself all over the carpet as Yujiro leers over him. And then more recently, as this episode, Baki made headlines in February 2025 for Yujiro Hanma's other visit to the White House, where he bullied both Trump, and well, he didn't really bully Trump. He more or less bullied Elon Musk. Like the wind from Yujiro's finger flick sent Elon Musk flying into a wall. It was amazing. So let's say you have listened to this episode and you're following along and go, wow, Dave really likes this Baki the Grappler thing. Where can I watch it? So Funimation licensed both seasons and released 2 DVD sets. You had 6 volumes for each season for a total of 12 volumes. This ran from June 2005 through February 2007, and they premiered this show on their television channel. So there used to be a Funimation channel. And so this Baki the Grappler came onto the Funimation channel in September 2006, shortly following the channel's launch in July of that same year. And the complete box sets for Season 1 and Season 2 came out in 2006 and 2008, respectively. These DVDs are the only official release for the series and is basically long out of print. Funimation did not get a good monetary return on this series. A lot of folks just weren't really sure what to do with Baki the Grappler. And so Funimation put out ads to martial arts and boxing and all of the sports channels. Check out Baki the Grappler. They were the most extra kind of ads you could imagine. So yeah, you can imagine watching a boxing match or a MMA fight, and then something like that comes across your airwaves. And they did not reprint Baki the Grappler. It was only the single run, and that was it. And even a more unfortunate tale for the English release of Baki the Grappler manga, the only official English translated release was in 2002 with a company called Raijin Comics. This company attempted to emulate the anthology approach. So the Shonen Jump in Japan, the big magazine booklet with all of the Shonen Jump series, of whatever chapter is released that week. So Raijin Comics tried to emulate that over here in the US. It didn't work. The company closed its doors in 2004 after only adapting 45 of the 370 chapters of Baki. Now, there is a light at the end of this tunnel. I've mentioned it several times over this episode. Baki made its grand return to television, or at least to streaming, in 2018 on Netflix. Again, it was animated by Studio TMS, and it picked up right after the Maximum Tournament. You can make this your starting point like I did back in 2020. Baki the Grappler was one of a few properties I actually picked up during the height of the pandemic. The writers of the 2018 show are very aware that it is likely the audience's first exposure to the world of Baki. So in the 2018 series, each character gets a brief backstory, courtesy of the narrator. In addition, Sentai Filmworks picked up the home video license to the 2018 season of Baki the Grappler, but they also did a full Sentai redub because it's just cheaper, and they have they have the studio and the means. And so for what it is, this is available on home video. Again, it's still all the way up on streaming on Netflix. This is something that Netflix directly reached out and paid for. So you would think it was going to stick around, but time will tell, as all things on streaming. And as far as that series. I mean, for what it's worth, when we first got the 2018 series, we weren't really sure if they were going to continue. But like I said, at the very top, we've gotten some pretty regular entries, which really makes this a good time, I think, to jump into the series. However, if you were to get any kind of engagement out of Baki the Grappler, you are basically required to buy into the insane logic of this world. Otherwise, I just cannot recommend this series to you. Basically, moves that are executed and things that happen to guys in this show would be the killing blow in any other fight. Again, some techniques in Baki is just like, these are two people saying hello. They're literally fights where a dude is like, when his arm is practically destroyed, bone shards are sticking out, and the guy's going, oh, well, I guess I can stab you with my, bone shards now. This is an incredibly hyper-violent series. It is unashamedly violent. This is the kind of work with a singular, uncompromising vision of men pursuing their dreams, no matter the cost to their bodies. And it is often at a terribly high price to their bodies, but also, as part of the insane logic of this show, Baki the Grappler is in a bit of what I would say a time warp. Because of how long the series has been going, and you'll have entire fights that take up volumes and volumes of manga, Baki the Grappler is also ostensibly aware of the passage of time. So again, as part of Yujiro's backstory, him being a Vietnam War veteran is perfectly in line with how old he would be at the beginning of the series, but now ostensibly he hasn't, no one's aged in Baki the Grappler. There's been one time skip after the season 1, and then since the Maximum Tournament saga, Baki has basically been 17 for the past 20 plus years. He may be 18, possibly 19, but I mean, everyone is basically sat there, yet we've gone through multiple US presidents, we've gone through, there's a meta aspect of people are aware, or like Itagaki is aware of the passage of time, but it's just business as usual in the Baki world. So you'll have a guy who is basically, he'll go through a fight, and at the end of the fight, he's basically lying on the ground, bleeding out. There's just no hope of recovery. They'll see a long list, and people are listing off all of his injuries, and the injury list goes on, like basically a scroll bouncing down the stairs. The dude's fine 3 days later. Sometimes you'll have a fight where the result is, okay, now the character has a cool scar. Doppo has both eyes at the beginning of Baki the Grappler, and then he fights Yujiro Hanma. After the end of that fight, Doppo's now wearing an eye patch, but just means his cool factor raises that much more. What ultimately the show is talking about, because it's so hyper-focused on fighting and strength and proving yourself as a man, the series uses all of this hyper-violence and this premise to open up a dialogue. Again, the meta aspect of it is the nature of strength. Does might truly make right? Itagaki is also very aware of how ridiculous some of these fights are, and is very specific in his descriptions when you have two dudes rolling in the dirt in this fight to the death, but the techniques that they're using make it look like they're hugging. When you have a guy whose entire thing is about biting, as far as the fight, he's ostensibly trying to rip this other guy's mouth out, but it's still two men locked jaws together, trying to sumo push each other out of the area, trying to gain supremacy. How else are you supposed to interpret that? And the narrator is very much on the nose about it as well. And so I would like to say, yes, obviously there is that aspect to Baki the Grappler, but it's under this veneer of two martial artists trying to kill each other. But it is a very thin veneer. To kind of wrap this up, for all the hammy dialogue and the ridiculous violence and all the overtones, I think what draws me to Baki the Grappler is there is a sincerity in this presentation that has kept me engaged. For one thing, for all of this ridiculousness and the narrator, everything is played 100% serious. There are no winks to the audience. There's no one's breaking character. There's nothing ironic about the way the action and the narrator presents Baki the Grappler. Coupled with Itagaki's distinct art style, once I got used to it, I think there's an inherent magnetism to his art and storytelling techniques that keeps drawing me in, not just because I like to see a lot of hard-punching shenanigans. There is depth to the storytelling, but every fight is like a dialogue between two people, especially with Baki versus his dad. There's a whole obviously a strong father-son aspect to it, where a lot of things that these two guys who, again, are very emotionally immature, but because they are fighting each other, it's their way of being able to truly communicate and basically air out all of the stuff that's been building up between them. It's a cleansing of the air between them and a changing of relationship between father and son. And it's like that between every character, typically, when you have these kinds of like premier story fights. It's a dialogue, it's a discussion. And that's the part of storytelling that I think really comes through with Itagaki's storytelling and his art direction, and to an equal extent, I think, in this anime as well. Yeah, for all these reasons and more, I am personally invested in this crazy-ass world, but by the same token, this is the most love it or hate it, yes-no kind of binary decisions on a show. I completely understand if you watch an episode or two and decide, nah, man, this is not for me. It is perfectly fine. So if you do continue with the show, let me know. If you don't continue with the show, let me know. I hope to see you guys on the next episode. Thank you for listening to my episode on Baki the Grappler, and I hope you guys have a good day, stay safe, and of course, watch more cartoons.